Hi guys, and welcome to the first ever episode of LivingTheDreamCanoes. My name's Dermo, and today I'll be showing you some of the interesting features on the River Weaver. The River Weaver runs in an anti-clockwise route across West Cheshire, northern England. The section I'm visiting today has always been important for trade, dating right back to Roman times, due to the River Mersey estuary, which has meant ships could sail in from the Irish Sea right up to here at Frodsham. The major trade was salt and cheese. Due to the high toll charges on local turnpikes, an Act of Parliament was proposed to make improvements to the river and make it navigable. The Navigation Act was authorised in 1720, and the work, which included 11 locks, was completed in 1732. Today we're going to visit one of those original locks. With the completion of the river navigation, this meant that salt could be transported from Winsford through Northwich to here at Frodsham, and then out onto the River Mersey. The navigation was completely reconstructed between 1870 and 1900, with the original locks being replaced by 5 much larger locks, capable of handling 1,000-ton coasters. Now that I've got the canoe loaded up, it's time to make a move. As I'm making my way to the water's edge, here's a map to show you exactly where I'll be paddling today. It's a town in the northwest of England called Frodsham. I'll be putting in on the south bank of the river. Then I'll be paddling with the current to Frodsham Sailing Club. Then I'll be turning around and heading back upstream to Frodsham Lock. After the lock, I'll be heading north to have a quick look at the Weir before making my way back to the car. The route in total is about 2 miles, but on this cold day in January, that's more than enough. Now that we're finally in the canoe, let's go and see what interesting things we can find on this journey. The first thing we see is Frodsham Road Bridge, which carries the A56 over the river. The bridge is Grade 2 listed. It is made of red sandstone and limestone and has 3 deep segmental arches, each with a span of around 25 metres or 82 feet. The arches themselves have limestone voussoirs with chamfered rock-faced rustication. Above are plain parapets of smooth finished limestone blocks. The rest of the bridge is of Toole sandstone with chamfered rustication. There are 2 interesting features. One is the slightly projecting rectangular piers, which have round arch niches and battered or sloped abutments. Another is the raised keystone on each face of the central arch, inscribed with the numbers 1850, which is the year the bridge was completed. Coming up on the right hand side is one of my favourite features of this section of the river. It is all that remains of what used to be the largest mill in Cheshire. With 4 stories and many additions, it had an internal loading bay direct from the river. The entrance to which can be seen here with this arch, which has subsequently been bricked up. The mill was re-equipped during the First World War but after 1918 some of the equipment was removed and sent to Edinburgh. The rest was sold for scrap during the Second World War. The mill has been powered by a number of sources over the years, firstly by water thanks to a cut made around the year 1730. The cut is shown on this map from 1753. I've highlighted it in dark blue. The mill is highlighted in red. This is what remains of the mill cut today. The channel from above the Weir to the west is still clearly visible, although heavily vegetated, and finishes just after it flows under the A56 road bridge. The surface of the road looks to be about 4 foot higher than when the bridge was originally constructed. The rest of the route down to the mill has been filled in. Ships carrying grain from the south of England, the Baltic, or even America could deliver it cheaply to the new mill here at Sutton. Now flour and oatmeal could be economically carried to the rapidly growing industrial populations of the northwest. On this picture of the mill, the arch can clearly be seen. This would have been not only the mill cut outflow, but also where smaller barges would have entered the mill to load and unload goods. The mill was then powered by steam as the coal trade on the river increased, making the mill's output more dependable in times of drought or if the water in the mill cut had frozen in winter. Finally, the mill was powered by electricity before it was ultimately closed in the mid-19th century after over 300 years of service. Thomas Rigby and Sons flour mill here at Frodsham Bridge received grain at the Frodsham Wharf via the barges. There is a grain elevator capable of lifting 60 tonnes per hour from the hold of a barge to the top of the mill. The mill warehouses and grain elevator are shown in this old photograph. The flour was distributed to bakeries by teams of horses. By 1982, the mill had suffered considerable demolition. Little remains of the mill, except for the mill house which is still present, although boarded up. It is a Grade 2 listed building and was built around 1820. Slightly further on, I pass underneath the magnificent railway bridge, which I'll talk about in a second. Right now, I'm just enjoying the fact that the sun popped out for 5 minutes. In the distance you can see the M56 motorway, also known as the North Cheshire Motorway. It runs from Manchester to the River Dee in Ellesmere Port, where it becomes the North Wales Expressway. The Weir Viaduct, which takes the 56 across the floodplain, is one of the longest concrete viaducts on the British motorway network, with a total length of 3,186 feet. It was built between 1968 and 1970 and opened to traffic on the 21st of February 1971. Now this is as far downstream as I'm paddling today, so it's time to turn around and head back upstream to Frodsham Lock. But first, let's have a proper look at this awesome railway bridge. This beautiful bridge that we can see now carries the Chester to Warrington Railway over the river. It was built between 1848 and 1850 for the Birkenhead, Lancashire and Cheshire Junction Railway. The engineer was James Rendell and the contractor was Thomas Brassey. Crossing over the river is made by two giant arches, each containing 4 cast iron supports. The cast iron supports have been reinforced over the years with the addition of concrete, which have been carefully designed to help bear the load whilst maintaining the bridge's original aesthetics. Each span is 92 feet across and the centre pier is made of brick and masonry. The river spans are approached by an impressive masonry viaduct. There are 21 arches, each spanning 40 foot on the left and 2 on the right. On my way back upstream, I noticed some raised brickwork on the western side of the centre span. I've taken a photo and tried to enhance it for you, to make the letters a little bit more clear. As you can see, the letters are MDCCL, which in Roman numerals is 1850, the year the bridge was finished. Now, no visit to Frodsham is complete without mentioning this beautiful catamaran which has been here for many years, that a gentleman lives aboard and he's currently renovating it. The Romans established a crossing right here, but the first documented bridge was known as Frodsham Parish Bridge, dates from around 1207 and was made of wood. In 1417, John Dunn, a forester from Delamere, was requested to give one whole oak tree for the repairs of the bridge. The bridge was rebuilt in brick around 1558, and once again, but this time in stone, in 1625. This bridge had 4 arches and can be seen on this early map. It was demolished to make way for the current bridge that was built in 1850. Coming up on the right hand side is an interesting looking boat. She appears to be grounded on the bank and doesn't look like she's moved in some time. The boat is 36 foot long and was built in Scotland. She is a purpose-built surveying vessel designed to survey the 36 miles of the Manchester Ship Canal. Her name is Surveyor number 1. Her job was to survey the channel in detail and help identify any peculiarities in the channel. If there had been a bank slip or a build-up of silt that could be hazardous to shipping, then it was her job to find it. She was built in the 1970s at Campbelltown Shipyard in Scotland. This is a picture of her on the day she was launched. To give you an idea of this little boat's maiden voyage, Campbelltown is marked here in red. She travelled over 200 miles from Campbelltown Shipyard to reach the Manchester Ship Canal. She surveyed the Manchester Ship Canal for about 40 years before being retired. In 2013 she was photographed on the Wharf at Latchford, but this is her in her heyday. Now she seems to be sentenced to spend the rest of her days beached on the bank here at Frodsham. it's time to head to the lock. Interestingly, during the summer this section of river is used for different types of water sports, including water skiing and wakeboarding. Directly in front of us is what remains of Frodsham Lock and Sluice Gate, built 240 years ago in the year 1780. This map from 1753 shows the large meander and weir that the lock and canal was designed to bypass. And here is the new lock and cut on this map from 1874. It exists because this section of the river was tidal prior to the installation of the Manchester Ship Canal. Therefore, the lock was necessary to lift boats up to the main man-made Frodsham Canal and onward to Winsford. At some point between 1806 and 1810, a new cut was built to the Deepwater Channel in the Mersey estuary, effectively bypassing this lock and dramatically decreasing its use to just local traffic. The navigation was completely reconstructed between 1870 and 1900. However, because of its now reduced usage, this lock was never reconstructed, making it one of the oldest original locks in the country. The lock is on the right and the sluice gate is on the left. Let's have a quick look at the sluice gate before we go into the lock. The sluice channel and gate was added so that the water level could be maintained in the canal once the use of the lock was in decline. Here's what remains of the tidal gates. They look like they've seen better days, but still not too bad considering their age and lack of maintenance. Before I get out and have a closer look, I notice these strange markings out of the corner of my eye. They are Roman numerals chiselled into the stones of the lock wall. They would have told the lockkeeper the depth of the river back when this section was tidal 240 years ago. Starting at 14, they drop 1 foot in measurement consecutively down to the riverbed. Although considering my paddle hit the floor a few times, I think the silt build-up has made them rather inaccurate. The lock gates on the cut side have been removed, so the only way across to the centre island is via this rather thin wooden beam, so bear with me while I cross it. Here's a few maps to show you just how the site has changed. This is 1753 before the lock was installed. Built in 1780, it remained a single lock chamber for 100 years before the sluice chamber was added. This is a plan of the lock. Originally, there would have been a lock chamber with 2 pairs of lock gates. Then the sluice channel was built next to it, and as it is today. The canal lock gates have been removed and replaced with a single wooden barricade. The chamber itself has been filled with stones. Here's the rather impressive sluice gate. It's my understanding that the sluice gate is no longer in use and therefore permanently in a raised position. Now you can't come all this way and not have a look at the view. It's hard to imagine the vast number of barges that would have been lined up here waiting for the tidal section to be deep enough to continue to the River Mersey. Sometimes they'd even be waiting for days due to neap tides. Hence the need for a deep water channel. In the distance is the railway viaduct I canoed under earlier, and to the right is the original course of the river up to the Weir. This is the now disused Frodsham cut and the remains of the lock chamber, overgrown with reeds. The lock chamber has been filled with what looks like railway ballast. This is to reduce the water pressure acting against the remaining 2 gates. They have since become the bed for all the reeds. In 2005, a feasibility study was conducted into the restoration and reopening of this lock so that pleasure boats could bypass the Manchester Ship Canal and bring a sort of regeneration to Frodsham waterfront. Sadly, 15 years later, nothing seems to have come from this. Before calling it a day, let's paddle a little further upstream and have a look at Frodsham Weir. That's the Weir directly in front of us, but unfortunately as I approached my camera phone began to run out of battery. Luckily, I filmed the Weir from the north side when I was paddling the navigation a few weeks ago. Here's some footage from that trip. As you can see, the weather was much more favourable that day. There has been a weir here since the 1720s, but this one was built in 1785 and has been modified a number of times over the years. It's here to raise the water level in the navigation and fill the mill cut that we looked at earlier. The main weir is made of coarse stone and built in a curved shape about 150 feet across, with 2 sluice gates on the south side of the weir. Let's have a look at one of those sluice chambers. The gates are in a closed position today, but the drop is about 3 foot into the river. I didn't want to get much closer to the edge in case I ended up going over. Well, that's it. Thank you very much for joining me on the first episode of LivingTheDreamCanoes. Hope you enjoyed it. All the footage was filmed by me with just my mobile phone, so thanks for bearing with me. See you next time, guys.